Hi, David. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you, Mark, as well. Yeah, cool.
So, for our listeners out there, it might be nice to tell them your name, a little bit about yourself, and what kind of things you do.
Yeah, 100%. So my name's David Wilks. I'm an experienced business consultant. So I've had about 6 years in consultancy, including 3 as a senior manager in the Big Four. And then before that, I had 10 years in central government. And in that time, I've just done the most incredible range of exciting projects. That includes data science, building an agile public transport service, gambling regulation, helping to fix a retail bank, just an insane variety of things I've done in my career in consultancy and central government.
Nice, okay. And it's probably worthwhile mentioning as well that you and I have worked together before.
Sure.
As we supply interim managers and permanent execs into clients, David was one of our interim managers and worked with us in 2024, so until quite recently.
Yeah.
I won't mention who the client is. I don't think that's very fair. But maybe what we could explain is a bit around the service of it. So they're a private equity-backed business, a few hundred million turnover. And like a lot of our clients, they're in the sort of support services type space. So they provide services as a business into other businesses. And they also provide services into government. And they also provide services into businesses that serve government. So B2B, B2G, and B2B2G. They're around support services, which is closely aligned to sort of facilities management for people less in the know. And your role was quite specific, wasn't it? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were doing with them?
Yes. So there were a few of us who had a sort of job title that was business analyst stroke project manager. And so the idea would be to be parachuted into a business area, both to analyze and understand the problem and then put in place milestones and manage their delivery to help solve it. And in fact, it was really quite an intense environment. So there were several projects I was working on simultaneously. Key priorities were cash flow and technology and understanding how to make the different parts of the business work together with better synergies. So
Yeah.
it was really that. It's business operations, cash flow, and technology implementation.
Great, thank you. I think you've explained that better than what I probably could explain it. In terms of, there was a few there. So just for the listeners, we did put a team together to do this with the client, and we've still got individuals that are supporting the client. But David's particular focus in one aspect was looking at profitability. And looking at profitability using IoT, so the Internet of
Yeah.
Things, at the same time. And I think a lot of our listeners out there, and a lot of execs actually, are still quite interested in IoT, how IoT can affect profitability, and how IoT can make themselves just a bit stickier with their current client base. Can
Indeed.
you tell me a bit about what you found?
Yes, absolutely. So, as you say, I think it's those key benefits of safety, savings, and sustainability. So, our particular client has a very, very big safety business. It's all about making sure that staff and members of the public are safe when they go into the sort of, end buildings that we're providing services to.
Yeah.
So monitoring the safety of devices and of the environment is a really, really key need. But then in terms of a business case for a private equity transformation, of course, really it's all about savings. And those savings come from reducing the number of human inspections of the facilities. And that can be particularly problematic if you're dealing with sites that have strict access control requirements. So
Yeah.
it can be quite complex to get your staff members in to do those inspections. And therefore, if you can do them remotely through IoT, it's a huge benefit. So part of what we were doing was about making operational savings for our existing client base. But then, in addition to those operational savings, there was also driving a whole new sort of group of clients. So there were a group of clients potential clients who were only interested because we could provide an IoT service. And therefore we could go to those. Yeah, absolutely. And so we could go to those clients and say, we know that you're interested in getting a really slick IoT service. We're starting to bring out that offering. How about you be one of our first Pathfinder clients for that? So there was the operational savings, the sort of new client base, and then there were additional benefits for the clients themselves. So notably energy savings and other savings for the end client. So those were the sort of operational efficiencies and fresh business that we were offering to increase profit. Now, the business we were working for had a sort of a reasonably full order book. And so the intention was that as we freed up staff time through this IoT activity, that those staff would then be redeployed to increase turnover. And of course, in the private equity sector, turnover multipliers are crucial. So the intention was to be driving that through the IoT activity. And as you said, there's this stickiness, and maybe that could almost be a fourth S, actually. So I had safety, savings and sustainability, but we could really add stickiness, because if you have a really good IoT proposition in there, then when they come to renew contracts, if your devices are working well, doing a really good service, that's a huge reason for a client to want to stay with you rather than re-engineer it. Yeah, so really those are the benefits we were trying to deliver. And then my particular role in that was in doing the financial modelling and business case, but then also the contract negotiation.
Who was this a contract negotiation with? Not particularly the company, but what type of company was it?
Oh, sorry. So with the IoT provider. So we were, absolutely, yes. So we were a services provider providing services into the FM sector, but then we had to go out and propose commercial arrangements with an IoT provider whose offerings we could then sell on to our clients. And so these two issues of getting the financial model right and getting the contract right were really crucial to securing good value. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So under the financial model, different people propose different solutions. So do we buy the IoT devices outright? Do we rent the IoT devices? What sort of partnership do we want to have with the IoT company? I mean, at one end, you could buy a company out, actually. If you're private equity backed, it could be a sensible proposition to add some technology multipliers there into your turnover and say, this is a really neat, sort of acquisition that goes alongside our existing portfolio. So one thing would be to buy them outright, and another would be to have a long-term, deep partnership where a private equity house could have a deep partnership with IoT providers, and then each time that private equity does acquisitions, they know where to go in terms of bringing in the IoT. So that could be one model. Yeah. And then there are mixed models. There are mixed models around who owns the IoT kit. What about the data? When the data from the IoT goes into the cloud, who manages that cloud platform? Again, that was uncertain, and that was one of the things we had to look at. And who provides the technical services on site? Supposing one of the IoT devices breaks, who is responsible to go and fix that? So all of these are different ways that you can structure an IoT contract. Yeah. And so we had several options, provided financial models, presented them to the board in order to get a decision about which path to go down with which supplier. And that was quite a detailed process that took a number of weeks. And it's a huge driver of profitability. You run out some of these models and the delta between, different ways of structuring the ownership, it can have a huge impact on the profitability in the medium term. And then in the contract, the key issues, I guess, I was looking at, there was risk, quality, inflation, and lock-in. So, I mean, one of the issues that happens with IoT devices is they get stolen sometimes, depending on
Yeah.
how easily they can be detached and removed. Who's responsible if that happens? And what if it all goes wrong? If there is an inaccurate reading and as a result someone is injured or becomes ill, who is responsible and how do you pass around that liability? But then also, um, one of the really, really crucial issues is that a lot of the IoT providers are making enormous investments, both in terms of the investment into developing the IoT product itself, but then even in their production line, they have a significant lead time kind of sourcing rare components and so on. And
Yeah.
so for them, the business is only profitable if they can lock in a good volume of IoT devices. Now,
Interesting.
yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. This is almost the most important issue in the contract negotiation is that the IoT company will only be profitable with a decent level of lock-in, but the FM or services provider will find that that involves a significant amount of risk if not all of the clients have yet signed to receive those devices. And so
Yeah.
exactly how do you manage those lock-in clauses over time? That is one of the key business risk issues in the contract. So this is it. So implementing it in practice involves some quite detailed work on financial modelling and contract negotiation, and that was what I was doing.
Got it. Well, it's a big financial decision, and like you said, there's many pitfalls along the way. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if I owned a facilities management type company or a company that looked
Yeah.
after clients' built environment, so clients' buildings, and I
Yeah.
was interested in IoT, would you suggest this is something they can just sort of dip their toe in, or is this something that they need to go with a bit more sort of forethought, investment, thinking long term, and make a strong decision and then back it?
Yes, exactly. Well, I think broadly, I'd recommend two different approaches depending on which route you go down. So our first question is what type of partnership you want to have with the IoT sector.
Yeah.
Now, if the type of partnership you want is one where you take an equity stake in the IoT player, then obviously that is quite a major decision that you can't really dip your toe in.
Yeah.
But that could be quite a profitable decision, which you might want to think about quite seriously. I mean, if it's a relatively bleeding edge area of IoT, and you can establish yourself not only as a major services provider directly to end FM clients, but also holding some really quite nice technology and IP, that could do a lot for the value of your business if you play it at the right moment. So that's a decision. It's really worth looking at the economics on, and I think people should take that decision quite seriously. But you can't dip your toe in it. But then, in terms of assuming that you don't want to play that game, then yes, I would try to structure the contract in as agile a way as possible, with a sort of a number of levels of volume or penalty clause, if you like. And so you have that conversation with the FM supplier, the IoT supplier, and you say, look, we're aiming for such and such a minimum volume, and that's what we're putting on the table that we're going to deliver you. Now, if we don't deliver that for you, then these will be the consequences by these dates.
Yeah, so like a not financial penalty, but they'll have to pay maybe a premium on top of because they're underutilizing.
You would pay a premium rate for low utilization, and it's getting that clause right that makes it mutually beneficial between both the services provider and the IoT provider.
That makes sense.
Exactly. So I recommend that people think seriously about a deep equity partnership in some cases, but if not doing that, you want to have an agile contract structure.
Yeah. Okay. No, good tips. And I think where in any industry where the profit margins are relatively low and the competition's particularly high, and facilities management is one of those areas, then having an edge is going to make all the difference. I think the challenge that a lot of the FM providers are having at the moment is that private equity is coming to this space and it's come into this space in a big way. So a lot of the big players now are owned by private equity and multiple private equity at the same time as well. So it's either consolidate or it's take advantage of the technology to then increase up the multiples. And from what we're seeing so far, there's a bit of a standoff on the M&A side, who's going to blink first. So actually they're looking down the technology side, one, to add value to the customer, but secondly, to lift up the enterprise value of the business. So I think what you did quite recently, I know the feedback from the client was excellent. You materially affected their profitability outlook. But in terms of businesses that haven't adopted IoT or don't offer IoT to their customers, what would you suggest they do in the short term in 2024 to at least start going down that path?
Well, one of the really key issues is the timing of market entry. So actually, depending on exactly which type of IoT device you're looking at, some are more bleeding edge than others. And that has an impact on the medium-term economics of that type of device. If you enter the market too early at too high a volume, you could find yourself locked into something that looks like a terribly bad price in 5 years' time, when everybody else is doing it at a much higher volume. And so one of the important issues I was looking at was the right timing of market entry. And actually, having thought through the economics properly in advance is a really, really helpful thing that you can do to be getting ready to do your IoT. So, for example, one of the things I looked at is the Office of National Statistics produces useful inflation data for electronic devices, and you can kind of trace that back, I think, at least to 1980. But looking at that kind of trend data and looking at other sort of industry trends in the particular IoT sector you're looking at, you can start to think to yourself, well, when is the right moment to enter this, and am I getting a good value proposition right now? So basically, I think really good economic modelling is important, and people can start doing it as their first step as they plan their IoT journey.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you don't have to go ahead with it. Once you've done the financial modelling, you built the model, you built the premise on which you might enter the market. If the timing's not quite right, you've still got all that information. You're still most of the way ready. You're just not ready to press the button right now. Now, I can see a lot of companies that being some real good value, because at the same time as them putting through this sort of feasibility in terms of board proposal, they're going to capture other potential opportunities along the way as they're analysing the data. So I think from an investment perspective, it doesn't sound like it's too much of a heavy investment for the potential reward that might come, especially in FM at the moment, which there's a lot of private equity activity.
Well, yes, and of course, a sort of very quick win would be just to leverage it in your conversation with your private equity backer. And so if you have a sort of a slew of propositions and a portfolio of activities which you think is going to enhance the value of your business, then you need to be ready for that conversation with potential backers to say, look, now is time for a new funding round. I've costed up all the various things I could do. Here's what the profitability multipliers are. And literally just having that information to hand enhances the value of your business. So that's the very first step. But then really thinking through the economics. This is my fundamental pitch, really, that you need to think through the economics and the partnerships in order to maximize the value. Because those are the two things that are really crucial in Internet of Things.
Yep, that makes sense. And what I'd further add, because don't forget, I provide interim managers. So hire an interim manager like you to come and do that, because it's not invasive, and the information that you'll collect will be valuable. And then if you don't press the button immediately, you'll be ready, because if you're not proposing this to your private equity owners, I'm pretty damn sure your private equity owners are going to start proposing it to you. You need to be ready.
Indeed. And actually, just to quickly interject, there is, of course, a middle way in which you can agree a pilot study. And so by doing that, you can say, actually, I have shown that this really can work and the client really is happy. and here is my plan to make it big. And that makes an even more persuasive addition to the value of your business than just having the study.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I think one of the reasons I wanted to ask you to do this podcast was because when I'm speaking to clients about things like IoT, it's very difficult for them to get unbiased information, unbiased advice, because who do you go to? Do you go to a large consultancy who want to create the report for you? Do you go to an IoT provider who want to sell you the IoT? Do you go to the client and ask the question, try and ascertain their appetite and what they might need, but then you might not provide it? You don't really want to go down that path. So you giving this information in such an unbiased way, using anecdotal examples, I think is going to help some of our listeners. So I really appreciate your time, sir.
Excellent. Very good to talk, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, David. Good to see you again.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.